Right off the top, I need to let you know that this will be a spoiler-filled review of Jurassic World Rebirth. But my goodness, I really wanted to love this movie. On paper, it looked like the comeback tour we'd all been waiting for. Gareth Edwards at the helm after the creator, money. Shot largely on location using Kodak 35mm with Panavision glass, just like the 1993 OG, please and thank you. David Koepp back on screenplay duty, just like the original as well. Count me in. A yummy gourmet plate only a 3-star Michelin restaurant could serve, only to end up tasting like Taco Bell at 3 a.m. after an EDM concert. Real quick though, as a wannabe Hollywood composer turned YouTuber, I can't not talk about the score. For the life of me, I could have sworn the first act kept trying to sneak in an E.T. adjacent theme. Da, 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 or something very, very similar. I mean, composer Alexander Desplat is usually top tier, very well respected in Hollywood, but here he's basically playing Mad Libs with John Williams' greatest hits. Even the upbeat fanfare heard when they successfully acquired the blood sample from the Mosasaurus reminded me of Indiana Jones. And then throw in a couple licensed songs? In a Jurassic movie? That's like putting Kenny G under Schindler's List. If you want John Williams vibes, hire Michael Giacchino again, since he scored Rogue One like he was born to replace Williams. Or at least give Alexander Desplat more than a weekend to write an entire score, because that's what it felt like. The first act felt like a slow burn that forgot to burn. We kick off the movie with a 1990-something lab mishap that tries to echo the raptor cage attack that isn't all that suspenseful nor scary, just people acting like they're scared. And honestly, what was with the Snickers wrapper bit? Weird product placement if you ask me. But then, as they're gathering the team of misfits and going on a boat towards their location, it just seemed like a bunch of talky talk. Long lost exes we only know the names of, so we have no emotional connection to them, and forced so-called playful banter that just felt like comedy by committee. Imagine a Tinder date where both people keep referencing inside jokes you don't care to know the backstory to. That's kind of like Act 1. But speaking of the dialogue, Act 1 was filled with such adult-themed jargon, scientific terms up the wazoo, corporate mumbo-jumbo, etc. You can't help but think about Jurassic Park when watching any new installment to this franchise, and that was the beauty of the original. The dialogue was mostly easy to follow for all ages, yet not juvenile, you know? Well, apart from the scene where they discuss the lysine contingency in the control room, I definitely didn't follow that when I was 11 seeing it in the theater in 1993. But I saw Rebirth in the theater with my family, including my 2 young daughters, and there were so many words flying at me in Act 1 that made me think, well, that flew over my daughters' heads. Yeah, maybe that too. Possibly that. Well, that definitely flew over their heads. I will say this though, that out of all the characters, I did enjoy Jonathan Bailey's character, Dr. Henry Loomis, the most. I'll admit I thought the Altoids bit in the museum at the beginning was pretty funny, loudly chomping away trying to decide if he wanted to go on this crazy expedition or not. But if you're going to introduce a character quirk like that, the least you could do is give us a good payoff with it later on. I thought it was maybe foreshadowing that he'd have the Altoids stand with him in a pocket and a dinosaur would smell them, endangering the whole group at some point, chaos ensues, etc. But no, the payoff ended up being a feeble attempt at a jump scare when they were slowly approaching the Titanosauruses, only to have the silence broken by his chomping of Altoids? That's why you decided to introduce that bit? But overall, I really enjoyed Jonathan Bailey's performance. I wish there was more written for him, and frankly, just a better group of people around him that I actually cared about. The 2 French-speaking deckhands? The fact that they didn't speak English automatically redshirted them. And yeah, sure enough, my spidey sense was right. Soon after saying bonjour, we said au revoir to those throwaway characters. Duncan, played by Mahershala Ali, was okay. I was along for his journey most of the way until the very end, which I'll get to later. And Scarlett Johansson's character was this rough on the edges, badass woman, but she was also kind of the comedic relief, or at least tried to be with some of that playful banter I was talking about. But in the end, it just kind of fell flat. And involving the random family out on their sailboat was kind of weird, to be honest. It felt like they were inserted into the plot just to raise the stakes, like filler dino nuggets from Costco. And the whole subplot of Xavier being an absolute douchebag of a boyfriend at the start, trying to win over his girlfriend's father Ruben? Yeesh. I know it's been done to death already, but there are ways to make that kind of subplot actually work so I genuinely care about them in the end, which I didn't. Although, I do have to admit that Xavier got the biggest laugh from the crowd, and I think you know which part I'm talking about. We're also meant to believe that the father, Ruben, I think, breaks his leg on the boat at one point, who then yo-yos between varying degrees of injured just to serve the plot when convenient. Those kinds of continuity errors drive me bonkers. Like, dude, you just broke your leg a couple hours ago and now you can swim away from danger just fine, but then once you are on land again, you have to use a makeshift cane? Come on. But one of the biggest flaws of this movie was the giant sloth-like pacing. You could count the memorable set pieces on one dino-clawed hand. Meanwhile, the 1993 original packs so much. Raptor cage mishap, the dig site, welcome to Jurassic Park, T-Rex paddock, Nedry disabling the park, Nedry getting et by the Dilophosaurus, clever girl, they're flocking this way, electric fence, Mr. Arnold's arm, shaky jello, kitchen hide and seek, raptors in the control room, T-Rex saves the day. All that in a tight 2 hours. Rebirth, on the other hand, is 7 minutes longer, and it feels like it's padding its runtime with dinosaur B-roll and philosophical TED Talks about the inevitable extinction of the human race. But here's the kicker. I'm in my 40s, right? Despite having already seen a lot through this lifetime that's given me the willies, I still have the capability of getting spooked, sure. But here? Not at all, man. Each dinosaur cameo felt like a checklist. Dilophosaurus? Check. Now let's shove it back into storage after 30 seconds of seeing it. T-Rex? Check. Which, by the way, we got to see in a scene taken from the original Jurassic Park book. But then T-Rex never makes an encore appearance? Lame. Oh, but don't forget about the raptors. Check. And yet, they only have one immediately pounced on and killed by a mutant flying raptor? Whoever approved that should be thrown in jail because it was truly a criminal act. But the fact that Universal keeps thinking the only way to up the ante in this franchise is to introduce hybrid dinosaurs, excuse me, let's call them what they really are, mutants, that's the only way to create drama and suspense at this point. I know for a fact that there are still many stories that could be written with this IP that involve the hundreds of other discovered dinosaurs that haven't even been touched in this franchise. The scene with the Titanosaurus herd in the Central Valley was also such a long, drawn-out love letter to the majesty of these massive creatures, really trying to amp up the spectacle with big swelling strings and a choir in the musical score. I was honestly surprised I didn't see Gareth Edwards himself pop out of the lower right corner holding up a cue card that said, ooh, ah. When it came to the biggest baddie of them all, the D-Rex, with that bulbous head and forward set teeth, did anyone else get Rancor vibes like I did? You know, the monster in the pit that Luke Skywalker ultimately defeats in Return of the Jedi? Just me? But also kind of like a xenomorph from the Alien franchise, or perhaps a beluga whale? Maybe that bulbous head is storing echolocation superpowers. Missed opportunity number 47 in this film. But the nail in the coffin with this movie was the ending. Duncan's flare-waving self-sacrifice? So emotional. Until we see another flare soaring across the night sky and he strolls back into frame alive, making the whole thing feel like a cheap soap opera, or worse, a CW show. Apparently only obvious cannon fodder characters and greasy corporate guys are allowed to die these days. Risk-free blockbuster cinema at its finest, folks. Now, I say all of this as a knee-jerk reaction, and yet, in the end, here's the most important takeaway. Remember how I said I saw this with my family, my wife and my 2 young daughters? Well, I had my 10-year-old sitting right next to me, and she was so giddy, jumping up and down when the end credits rolled, thrilled at what she had just seen. She even said this was her second favorite behind the original Jurassic Park. So guess what? Take what you want from all the word vomit I just spewed. It's all subjective anyway, because in the end it doesn't really matter what I think. My daughters loved it. And you know, that's what matters to me. In the vast sea of movie critiques you come across on YouTube, I am just another nerdy white 40-something male talking trash on the internet. So with that being said,
this thing, it wasn't made for me, but that don't mean it might not be for you. And And that's okay, friend.
Alright, that about wraps up my thoughts on Jurassic World Rebirth, my friends. What did you think of the movie? And honestly, leave me a comment. How do you think it could have gone better? How can Universal revive this franchise without hybrid monster duct tape? The movie already chomped down another $300 million in its opening weekend, so expect more sequels until the sun burns out, my friends. Anywho, without even mutant dinosaurs, this world is crazy as it is already, so it only makes sense to be kind to everyone you come in contact with. Don't just watch TV shows and movies, experience them. Hopefully in the theater, since I'm pretty sure you don't have a projector screen that large, nor a surround sound system of that caliber. Just saying. And of course, appreciate good sound design.